All right, now we're going to go into some of the classifications for cannabis. Now, the botanical classification is from the family Cannabaceae. The two genuses that I first learned about and were the only two genuses that were in Cannabaceae was the hemp plant and the hops plant. And the hops plant, of course, is what you make beer out of. And interesting was that both of them are concentrating on a couple of things, and that's the terpenes. I mean, craft beer, it's all about the terpenes. That's where you get your different tastes. And that's where you get your different aromas and flavors in cannabis. Today, this has completely changed. The Cannabaceae has perhaps 100 different genuses in it. They've changed the classification of the plant. They've changed the order. The order used to be the nettle order. Now it's the rose order. So Cannabaceae has grown a lot in the last 50 years. Anyway, there are two subspecies, Indica and Ruderalis. Some people opt that they're, species of and by themselves, but the scientific community doesn't agree with that. There's only one species, and that's Sativa. Species is supposed to be something that arises natural. That was the whole point with it. And whether it's been caused by people on purpose or inadvertently, simply by carrying it to a part of the world where it's never grown before, doesn't qualify them as species. Another classification system that's used in the industry all the time is a physical chemical classification. And it simply breaks them down by what the leaves look like and whether they have THC or not. So you have NLDs, a narrow leaf drug, meaning it has a decent percentage of THC. BLD is same thing, broadleaf drug. That would be more of your indicas. The NLD would be more of your sativas. And you have the same for hemp. And the hemp, of course, would have extremely small levels of THC. And you also have broadleaf hemp, mostly from Asia. And then another classification system that's used in the industry all the time is the cannabinoid classification. And this goes by types. So type 1 would be a high THC plant. And type 2 would be a plant that has significant amounts of both THC and CBD. And type 3 would have CBD as the prominent cannabinoid with very little, if any, THC at all. I put in here type 4, which is THCV, or tetrahydrocannabivarin. And I put that in because this is the first type 4 I had seen in the literature, and this goes back to the early 70s. And to me, it's of interest that lately I've seen people suggesting that type 4 should be THCP, which is tetrahydrocannabinol, recently discovered, or it should be a CBG, cannabigerol. And so anything beyond type 3 has not been formalized at all. And I think that eventually this will be formalized. There will be a THC organization that will be charged with doing things like this. And I think that this type of classification will also grow in another way, and that is that it may have a sub to the 3, which would be perhaps a letter. And the letter would denote its suite of terpenes. It seems that the terpenes do kind of come in groups. And I think that grouping, once it's distinguished, will also be added to this. Now, Indica and Sativa, this is all you hear in this industry now. On the left, you see a Mexican Sativa. Typical plant, these can grow really large. This reminds me of a 17-foot haze plant I once grew, which had branches that were about 10 feet long, so the plant took up, more than 20-foot circle. And on the right, you have an Indica. This is a Pakistani Indica, and you can see that's a much more compact growth, really nice deep green leaves. And here's leaves. A leaf is palmately compound, and commonly the number of leaflets would be 7 to 11. I've seen it as high as 19. There are some plants that actually are called monophyllous, where they only have one leaflet per leaf. And the leaflets are called in the industry leaflets, fingers, blades, and botanically the lamina. But basically fingers and blades, and I think, are the most commonly used. Now, as the plant grows, it starts off as a dicot, which means that it has 2 leaves, and it pairs in its leaves as it grows. It starts off that the leaves, the first true leaves, have just a single leaflet. The next set of leaves will have 3 leaflets, and so forth. It keeps increasing as it grows in the vegetative state. But once it's about to enter flowering, the number of leaflets per leaf starts to decrease till finally, when you have the actual buds, the leaves within the buds, the small leaves or bud leaves, will only have 3 leaflets or 1 leaflet. The sativas, the leaves have more blades than the indicas do, and the blades are much, much narrower. The leaves tend to be longer and larger. This is an Acapulco old heirloom I happen to be growing. And you can see the very little leaves on this plant that's probably about 6, 8 weeks old. Now the next 3 slides here basically going to give you a description of sativa, indica, and also ruderalis, which we haven't talked about much. Notice that cannabis sativa, and these are tropical plants, they have very low frost tolerance, but they have high mold resistance. So for indoor growers, they have the difficulty that the plant tends to want to grow tall and take up a lot of room, but also it's pretty resistant to the molds that you get when you're growing indoors. So here's a description of indica. Now these have good frost tolerance because they originated from an area that was very dry and colder. But that very adaptation to the dryness also made it susceptible to fungus and mold diseases. This affected the indoor growing industry very much, to the point where growers were using systemic fungicides as just a regular course of things. They dip their cuttings and clones into this and grow them up. Not a good thing to be smoking, but it was the way it was done. Indicas have very broad leaflets, and they have more of a blue-green color to them, while the sativas have more something that's more of a yellow-green color. And this is one that I haven't brought up yet, and this is Kush. Now, Kush is basically Afghani. These have plants that originated from the Hindu Kush. The Hindu Kush is a very mountainous area, northern Afghanistan, and Pakistan does meet the Hindu Kush mountains, also Tajikistan, I think it's pronounced, and even China. A small part of it is in China. This was a major trade route in the ancient world, and this is one of the places that marijuana or cannabis spread from. Spread down to India, into China, and eventually, of course, went all over the world. Anyway, I did grow a few Kush back in the 70s, and they look kind of like on the right. They had wider leaflets than sativas, but not quite what the Afghanis did. They also were a lighter color. They weren't really very potent, so I only grew 2 of them, and I only grew them once. Now, the industry is just filled with hybrids. And the hybrids, the leaves are basically between what you would see in a pure indica and a pure sativa. The colors, basically marijuana is green or cannabis is green. The yellow is just because they're old. It's just like fall colors. The purple is a color that cannabis can be. Not from the very start. They start off green, but as they mature, often the purple color comes out, and purple color also comes out from cold. And here's Ruderalis.